The Porters always made a show of Christmas, matching pajamas, gingerbread house contests, an over-decorated tree that brushed the ceiling, and the presents always presents. Towering stacks of boxes with metallic wrapping and cursive tags that screamed tradition. We gathered at my parents' home in Asheville that year, like we did every December. It was snowing soft and slow outside. Inside the fireplace cracked carols, hummed through the speakers, and laughter bounced off the walls. Okay, Dad said, clapping his hands. Let's hand out the gifts. My brother Nathan's kids shrieked and pounced on the pile under the tree. Mom handed out names with her usual dramatic flair, for Jamie from Santa Grandma to Nathan from your favorite sister. She made a point of delivering each box by hand, teasing each recipient with guesses before they tore the paper open. Boxes flew open. Tissue paper soared. The room filled with thank yous and oh my gods. I waited. I sat between the piano and the old cabinet of snow globes, my mug of cider cooling in my hands. One by one names were called. But not mine. It wasn't an accident. When the last ribbon had been pulled, and everyone was already comparing gadgets and holding up scarves. Mom looked up like she'd forgotten something, then smirked. She was wearing red lipstick and holding her wine glass like a trophy. Sweetheart, she said loud enough for the whole room, we forgot you. Laughter. It wasn't just hers. Dad chuckled. Nathan gave a half snort. Even my sister-in-law looked down like she didn't want to laugh but couldn't stop herself. Like it was some inside joke I'd missed. No one looked at me directly. I set my mug down on the low table beside me. I smiled. Not the kind you offer when someone gives you socks. Not the kind you give when trying to be polite. No, this smile had weight. Years of weight. I stood. No one noticed until I cleared my throat. Actually, I said, and the room hushed a notch. My voice was calm, smooth, like reading a recipe. I reached into the deep pocket of my coat, I'd never taken it off, and pulled out a thick manila folder. It was creased but clean. I brought something too, I said. Now they looked. I tapped the folder once against my palm, then flipped it open. The papers were crisp stapled and marked with the county seal. Dad squinted. What's that? I met his eyes finally. As of yesterday, this house, the one you're sitting in, belongs to me. The silence was sudden and sharp. Even the kids stopped rustling wrappers. You what? Mom blinked. I bought it, I said simply. At the county auction. The house was behind on taxes, remember? Nathan stood halfway red, creeping into his face. That's not, you can't. You all have 10 days to leave. No one laughed now. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. The smell of cinnamon and ham lingered in the air like a ghost. Christmas lights blinked on the mantel, oblivious to the way every pair of eyes in the room had locked onto the folder in my hands. Dad blinked first. This is a joke, he said, letting out a short, humorless laugh. Lauren, honey, this is some kind of gag, right? I didn't respond. I just turned the folder around, stepped forward, and placed the document's deed payment confirmation title transfer on the coffee table. My fingers grazed the edge of the old snow globe with the little cabin inside. I remembered shaking that globe as a child, pretending the house inside was ours. Now it was. What the hell is this? Nathan snapped, already grabbing the papers. He looked ridiculous with a Bluetooth speaker still wrapped around his wrist like a toy. You bought the house. With what you don't even I do, I said, still calm. I bought it through a holding company. Everything is filed and recorded. County clerk's stamp is on the second page. He flipped pages with shaking fingers, muttering under his breath. Mom didn't move. Her wine glass hovered near her lips, untouched. She looked like someone watching her perfectly curated Christmas special glitch on live TV. You really did this, she said finally. Her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. You said you forgot me, I said, shrugging. I figured you wouldn't miss the house. Dad's face flushed. This is your family. You don't ambush your family with legal paperwork on Christmas Day. I turned to him. I didn't ambush anyone, I responded. To years of being overlooked. This house has 3 years of unpaid taxes, Dad. You were about 3 months away from foreclosure. I didn't steal anything. I saved it. Nathan scoffed. Bull, you wanted to make a scene. No, I said, stepping back and folding my arms. If I wanted a scene, I would have brought a sheriff with the eviction notice. I came alone. I brought the papers, I spoke clearly. That's more respect than I've ever been shown here. Mom stood up slowly. She still held the wine like armor. You blindsided us. Why didn't you talk to us? Why didn't you say something if you knew I did? I said quietly. You weren't listening. You haven't been listening for years. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Behind her, the Christmas tree blinked gently, casting little colored shadows across the floor. My niece still clutched a doll to her chest. My nephew had stopped recording his new hover drone. Silence had swallowed the holiday whole. Nathan dropped the folder like it burned. You're not kicking us out, I met his eyes. You're not tenants. You were squatters about to be evicted by the state. I just got there first. Dad's jaw clenched. You think owning the deed gives you power over us? No, I said. I think it gave me the ability to finally speak loud enough that you'd listen. No one moved. No one defended me. Not the sister-in-law who once asked me to co-sign her loan. Not Nathan, who I'd bailed out of a credit card lawsuit 2 years ago. Not even Mom, who once left me behind at school pickup and never noticed. I picked up the folder again, gently slid the pages back in. This wasn't about revenge, I said. It was about clarity. You forgot me. So I remembered myself. And with that, I placed the folder back in my coat and sat down. Like I'd never stood at all. There are no photos of me in the hallway. That's not metaphor, I mean it literally. In my parents' house, there's a gallery wall by the stairs, a winding display of school portraits, team trophies, graduation caps, frozen in midair, Nathan's football uniform in 8th grade, our dog Max in a Santa hat, my cousin's baby shower. I'm not there. The first time I noticed I was 14. I asked Mom why. She blinked, looked at the wall like it was new, and said, "Oh, sweetheart. I guess we just didn't have the camera that year." I checked later, the year I turned 7 dozens of photos, just none with me in them. So I learned early I was easier to forget. Not in a cruel way at first. It was passive, casual. Like background music at a restaurant, nice maybe, but not something anyone noticed when it stopped playing. I was the quiet one. Not by nature, but by necessity. Nathan was loud, charming, always in the middle of everything. He got into trouble, which earned him attention. I got straight A's, which earned me silence. He crashed a car at 16. They held him and cried. I got into college early. They emailed me a thumbs-up emoji. I taught myself how to drive with videos on YouTube. Learned how to braid my own hair from a library book. Filled out my FAFSA forms on a borrowed Chromebook in the high school library. The night I got my acceptance letter from Georgia Tech, I printed it out and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet. In the morning, it was gone, replaced by Nathan's weekend fishing schedule. I didn't ask where it went. I already knew. But I didn't grow bitter, not right away. I adapted, became useful. The family needed someone who didn't ask for much. Someone who answered texts at 2 a.m., someone who knew how to fix the router file. Their tax extensions explained credit scores. I was the shadow that carried things. Invisibility wasn't painful at first. It was practical. Until I started noticing the cost. It looked like skipped birthdays. Like eating dinner alone on Thanksgiving because everyone thought you were with a friend. Like helping Mom redesign her entire website over a weekend, then seeing Nathan's name listed on the thank you page. I started shrinking, not physically, but inside. At family events, I'd smile and pour wine and ask about everyone's life, then drive home and realize no one had asked about mine. Once I got promoted, it was a big deal. I'd managed a failing regional branch into the black in under a year. I sent a family text. One response. "That's nice, Lauren. Hey, can you look at the cable bill again? It's acting up." I used to cry, quietly in parking lots, in bathroom stalls. Not because they didn't love me. I'm sure in some default way they did. But because they didn't see me. And over time, I started believing maybe I really wasn't worth seeing. Until that changed. It didn't happen all at once. It started like a small crack, a moment, a comment, a laugh behind a closed door. But it was enough. Enough to wake something up. To remind me that shadows only exist where light has been blocked. And I was done being the shape behind someone else's spotlight. It was amazing how often I was needed. Not invited, not celebrated, but needed. "Hey Lauren, you're good with numbers, right? Can you look over this lease for me, sweetheart? You know, Excel, don't you? Uncle Gary's taxes are a mess. Hey, I hate to ask, but we're short on rent. And I remembered you got that new job." I became a Swiss Army knife they kept in the junk drawer out of sight until a pipe burst or a bank called. And I said yes, every time, Like it was instinct. Not because I expected gratitude. I'd stopped hoping for that after college. But I thought maybe, just maybe, if I showed up enough, fixed enough, paid enough, they'd notice. They'd say, "We're proud of you." They'd say, "We see you." They'd say my name like it meant something. Instead, they'd say, "Lauren will handle it. She always does." And when the crisis passed, I'd disappear again like a band-aid they forgot to remove. I kept track. Not at first, but eventually something in me got tired. So I started documenting. Not revenge, just records. Screenshots of the urgent texts, Venmo receipts, emails with subject lines like, "Just a quick favor," and "One more thing." I even started saving the photos. You know, the ones, the group shots from family vacations I wasn't invited to. Birthday cakes with names iced in thick white frosting. Cards signed from all of us that somehow skipped me. I saved them like exhibits in a quiet personal trial. The more I collected, the more I saw it for what it was: not forgetfulness, but a pattern. They remembered me when they needed help. They forgot me when they wanted joy. And slowly that realization turned from pain to clarity. I wasn't angry, not the loud burning kind of anger. Mine was quieter, like a room that used to echo, now filled with nothing but still air. One night I got a voicemail from my sister-in-law. It was 2 minutes of sighs and passive-aggressive sweetness. "Hey Lauren, we're moving next weekend. It's a lot and Nathan's back is still acting up. We could really use your help. You've got that SUV, right?" No mention of Christmas, no asking how I was. Just assuming I'd say yes. I didn't respond. That was the first time. The next week Nathan texted, "You okay?" Didn't hear back. I left it unread. Then came the birthday dinner, not mine of course, and a sentence that would slice clean through everything I'd been holding together. But that came later. First, I had to learn one more lesson: that being useful isn't the same as being loved. And silence isn't always consent. Sometimes it's a strategy. It happened at Aunt Patrice's birthday brunch. The whole family was there: cousins, step-cousins, people I hadn't seen in years. They'd rented out a vineyard restaurant just outside Asheville. Everyone showed up in pastel, smiling for photos and sipping mimosas like it was Easter Sunday. I arrived 15 minutes early. I always did. Helped set the table cards, adjusted the centerpiece, and volunteered to take group photos so everyone else could be in them. I didn't mind being behind the camera. I was used to that. But that day, as the speeches wound down and everyone buzzed around the cheese boards, I went to the restroom, a tiny side hallway with a curtain instead of a door. And I heard her voice, my mother. She was standing just a few feet from the sink, speaking to someone, maybe Aunt Patrice, maybe a neighbor. I didn't recognize the second voice. "Oh, Lauren," Mom chuckled. "She's fine. She's not really part of things, you know." The other woman murmured something I couldn't catch. Mom continued, light laughing. "She shows up, she's helpful, but she's background. Always has been. Nathan's the one who keeps the family together. Lauren's more like," she paused, then more like a support beam. "You don't notice it until it cracks." They both laughed. And I stood there just behind the curtain, frozen. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It wasn't sharp or sudden. It landed soft like snowfall on a roof that had already caved in. Not part of things. Background. Useful until I break. She didn't say it with venom. That would have been easier. She said it like it was obvious. Like she'd been saying it for years, and only now did I happen to overhear. I left before dessert. No one noticed. On the drive home, I turned off the music. Drove in silence past pine trees and half-lit strip malls, through neighborhoods that still had plastic snowmen in their yards. Something inside me was done. Not angry, not bitter, just done. 2 days later, I remembered the envelope I'd seen on my parents' kitchen table over Thanksgiving. I hadn't thought much of it then, white wrinkled, addressed to current resident. That night, I went online, checked the county's property tax website. 3 years delinquent. The house, the one they hosted Christmas in, the one I grew up cleaning but never had a room photo of, was in pre-foreclosure. And for the first time in my life, I didn't offer help. I opened a new browser tab, typed in "Quiet Title Attorney Asheville," and made an appointment. I didn't tell anyone I'd seen the notice. Not that they would have listened if I had. The letter, a basic government-issued warning, had been half buried under a pile of grocery receipts and circular ads on my parents' dining table. White envelope addressed to current resident, stamped "Final Notice Delinquent Property Tax." At the time, I'd assumed they'd taken care of it. Just another bill in the avalanche they never quite organized. But after hearing my mother call me background, I saw it differently. It wasn't just another overdue letter. It was an opportunity. I didn't move fast out of spite. I moved carefully, like someone digging out of quicksand, 1 inch at a time. First, I researched the property records. Then I called the county office and confirmed 3 years unpaid. The home was scheduled for public auction in less than 60 days. A few quiet questions later, I had everything I needed to know. The mortgage had been paid off years ago, which meant that once the tax sale went through, there'd be no bank to interfere. No creditors to step in. Just a clean transfer of ownership to the highest bidder. I could have waited, could have swooped in at the last second with a bold offer and a smirk. But I didn't want drama. I wanted control. That's when I found her Miss Evelyn Reed, real estate attorney. She specialized in quiet title transfers and worked exclusively with limited liability companies. I scheduled a consultation, drove 2 towns over, paid cash. At her office, I signed the paperwork without fanfare. She raised an eyebrow when I told her the property address. Family home, she asked. Formerly, I said. She didn't press. We formed the LLC in under a week. Named it after a flower my mother once said she hated Trillium Haven Holdings. Just to be petty in the smallest, most private way. The auction went exactly as expected. Low attendance, no serious bids. Evelyn placed the offer on my behalf through the LLC. It was accepted the next morning. Within 14 days, the title was cleared. The deed was transferred. The house, the one where I'd been invisible for most of my life, was mine. And no one knew. That was the part I loved the most. I didn't show up with a truck, didn't change the locks. I waited. Let Christmas inch closer. Watched the family group chat light up with plans about ham cookies and who's bringing what. No one mentioned the tax auction. No one checked the county records. They never saw me coming. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, I played the part, responded to texts, confirmed I'd be there. I even offered to bring cider. I showed up in the same coat I always wore, carrying a folder they assumed was work. It was poetic in a way. For years I'd been the fallback, the just in case. This time I was the fine print they forgot to read. The morning of Christmas, I parked on the street instead of the driveway, knocked like a guest, complimented the garland, hugged them like nothing had changed. Inside, everything was as I remembered: the scent of cinnamon pine cones, the too loud playlist, the chaos of half-taped wrapping paper, and of course the gifts. Dozens of them, all labeled, all personalized. Except for me. When the last one was handed out and Mom turned to me with her wine glass grin and said, "Sweetheart, we forgot you," I smiled. Really smiled. Because this time I hadn't come for a gift. I'd come to deliver one, just not the kind that fits in a box. No one reacted at first. It was like I'd spoken in another language. The fireplace crackled. Someone's smartwatch beeped faintly in the silence. My niece dropped a candy cane. Then Dad stood slow and stiff, as if his knees didn't believe him. "Lauren," he said, voice strained, "that's not funny. It's not a joke." I reached into my coat pocket and took out the folder. This time I didn't slam it down. I walked to the coffee table and placed it gently between the cookie tray and the tinsel centerpiece. Nathan leaned forward, grabbing the top page like it might disappear if he didn't hold it fast. His lips moved as he read. What is this Trillium Haven Holdings? What kind of scam is..." "It's mine," I said. "That's the holding company. I formed it last month. The LLC owns the house, and I own the LLC." He blinked. "You're lying." Mom finally stood. Her voice was shaking, though she tried to make it sound smooth. "Lauren, sweetheart, this isn't how families handle things." I tilted my head. "Is forgetting someone in front of a room full of people how we handle things?" She swallowed. "I saved this house from foreclosure," I continued. 3 years of unpaid taxes. It was going to auction whether I showed up or not. I just made sure I was the one standing there when it did. "You didn't say anything," Dad snapped. "You blindsided us." "No," I said. I stopped offering. "There's a difference." Nathan tossed the folder back onto the table. "You think this makes you powerful, makes you better?" "No," I said, folding my arms. "It makes me free." He scoffed, pacing now. "This is insane. You're kicking your own parents out on Christmas. I gave you 10 days, I said. The state would have given you 3. Dad looked like he might combust. "After everything we've done for you," I laughed, not bitter, just hollow. "What exactly have you done?" No one answered. Behind me, the Christmas lights blinked like Morse code. My sister-in-law suddenly stood and said she had to check on the kids. My niece was crying quietly now. Mom stepped forward, her tone pleading. "Lauren, this isn't you." I looked at her, really looked, and said, "No. This is me when I stop begging to be noticed." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I picked up the folder and tucked it under my arm. "I'm not staying for dessert," I said. "You should start packing." Then I walked to the door. Not rushed, not angry, just done. As I reached for the handle, Dad barked, "Don't you dare think this makes you family." I paused. "Don't worry," I said. I stopped thinking that years ago, and I walked out into the cold, into the quiet. It was the first Christmas I hadn't felt invisible, and the last one I'd ever spend pretending. The snow had started falling again by the time I got back to my apartment. I didn't turn on the lights right away. I set the folder on the kitchen counter, slipped off my boots, and stood in the dark, watching flakes blur the windows like tiny white ghosts. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was quiet. Not the heavy, pressurized silence I'd grown up with, the kind where you had to tiptoe around someone's mood, someone's pride. This was something else, something clean. I poured myself a cup of tea. No messages, no missed calls, just stillness. And for once, I let it stay. A few days later, a manila envelope arrived. No return address, just my name in rushed handwriting. Inside was an old photo, glossy, faded, slightly bent at the corners. It was a family shot, clearly taken during some summer barbecue. Everyone was there: Dad in his lawn chair, Nathan mid-burger, my mother holding a tray of lemonade. I stared at it for a full minute before realizing what I was looking at. I wasn't in the picture, not even cropped out. Just never there. I flipped it over, nothing written, no one had noticed. Not when they took it, not when they printed it. Not even now when someone mailed it to me. For a heartbeat, something twisted in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like recognition. A final nod from the universe that I'd never been part of that frame. That version of the family. I set the photo aside. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, pulled out a wooden picture frame I'd bought but never used. I slid in a different photo, one I'd taken last fall. It was a blurry shot of me standing by the river, downtown, leaves, all orange and gold behind me. I was holding a coffee and laughing at something off camera. Just me. No matching outfits, no perfect poses, but real. Mine. I moved out of Asheville 3 months later, sold the house to a nonprofit that turned it into a transitional shelter for women aging out of foster care. That part I didn't tell anyone. Didn't need to. I bought a small home in a quieter town, nothing fancy. Just enough space for books and light and plants that didn't need much tending. I started volunteering twice a week. Nothing heroic, mostly just listening. Helping other women say out loud what I'd spent years too afraid to admit I was there. I tried. And it wasn't enough because I was never meant to fit. We laughed a lot, drank too much tea, named a group chat after a cactus one of them brought to the meeting. And slowly, I started to feel like a person again. Not a function, not a fallback, not a ghost. One evening, I passed by a vintage shop downtown and saw a sign painted in the window. "Objects in mirror are finally seen." I stood there for a long moment watching my reflection. Then I smiled. Not because I won, but because I was whole, and that finally was enough.